It begins as a whisper on the horizon, a line that doesn't belong. The vast, familiar expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, a constant companion to the city of dreams, seems to buckle. The sky above is a placid blue, the sun of June 7th, 2025, casting long shadows from the towers of Manhattan. But out there, miles from the shore, the sea is rising. It is not a storm surge, born of wind and fury. This is something older, something deeper, a force that has traveled thousands of miles, silent and unseen until now. The water gathers itself into a monstrous form, a moving mountain of dark, churning liquid. The sight is both beautiful and terrifying. The wave's crest catches the sunlight, shimmering like a wall of polished obsidian. It stretches from one end of the horizon to the other, a seamless, unstoppable curtain of water. Birds that were gliding over the waves are now dwarfed by its sheer scale, scattering in confusion. The sound has not yet reached the city, but the silence feels heavy, pregnant with the coming roar. This is not the ocean as we know it. It is the ocean unleashed, a raw expression of the planet's immense power, now aimed directly at the heart of modern civilization. On the shores of Coney Island, beachgoers stop their games. At the tip of Battery Park, tourists lower their cameras, their faces etched with disbelief. What they are witnessing defies logic, a spectacle so grand, it feels like a scene from a disaster film. The wave doesn't crash like a normal breaker, it swells. It grows taller and more menacing with each passing second, its face a sheer cliff of water. It is a physical manifestation of a nightmare, a liquid wall preparing to erase the familiar world. The city, with all its noise and ambition, is about to fall silent. The initial reaction is a collective gasp, a city of millions drawing a single sharp breath. The illusion of permanence of our concrete and steel fortresses being impervious begins to crumble. This wave is not just water. It is a messenger from the deep, carrying a story of geological violence that occurred hours ago and hundreds of miles away. It is a reminder that our world is built on a fragile crust, floating atop forces we can neither see nor control. And now, that force has arrived at our doorstep, ready to reclaim the land we so confidently call our own. To understand the wave, we must look beneath the surface of the ocean. Deep in the dark, cold abyss, the Earth's crust is a mosaic of massive tectonic plates. These plates are in constant, slow-motion collision. They grind against each other, they slide past one another, and sometimes, one is forced underneath another. This process can be silent for centuries, building up incredible stress. But when that stress is released in a sudden, violent snap, the sea floor can be thrust upwards or drop downwards by several meters. This is an underwater earthquake, a seismic convulsion that displaces a colossal volume of water. This sudden movement of the seafloor acts like a giant paddle, pushing the entire column of water above it. The energy from the earthquake is transferred to the ocean, creating a series of powerful waves. These are not the surface waves we see on a windy day. A tsunami is a deep water phenomenon. In the open ocean, the wave might be only a meter high, but its wavelength can be hundreds of kilometers long. A ship might pass over it, and its crew would feel nothing, completely unaware of the immense energy traveling just beneath them. It is a silent, invisible courier of destruction. Earthquakes are the most common trigger, but they are not the only one. Imagine a massive underwater landslide. On the steep, unstable slopes of the continental shelf, entire mountains of sediment can collapse. The Canary Islands, for example, have a volcano, Cumbre Vieja, that experts fear could one day collapse into the Atlantic. Such an event would displace an unimaginable amount of water, sending a megatsunami racing across the ocean. While the probability is low, the consequences would be catastrophic, far exceeding those of even a powerful earthquake-generated tsunami. It is a threat born not from a fault line, but from gravity itself. And then there is the rarest trigger of all, an impact from space. A large asteroid or comet striking the ocean would be the ultimate catalyst. The impact would vaporize a tremendous volume of water and displace even more, creating waves of truly biblical proportions. This is the stuff of extinction-level events, a scenario that has played out in Earth's distant past. While the chances of this happening in our lifetime are exceedingly small, it remains a possibility in the cosmic lottery. Each of these triggers, earthquake, landslide, or impact, reminds us that the ocean's tranquility is a delicate balance, easily disturbed by the immense forces of our planet and the universe. Is New York City truly at risk? The city sits on the east coast of the United States, far from the Pacific's notorious Ring of Fire, where most tsunamis occur. This geographical distance creates a deceptive sense of security. We associate tsunamis with places like Japan or Indonesia, regions perched on the edges of colliding tectonic plates. The Atlantic Ocean, by comparison, is considered relatively calm. Its passive margin means the tectonic plates are not actively crashing into each other near our coast. But this does not grant us immunity. It only means the threat comes from farther away. The primary danger for New York comes from two specific distant sources. The first is the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. This is an active seismic zone where the North American plate is sliding under the Caribbean plate. A powerful earthquake there, of magnitude 8.0 or higher, could certainly generate a dangerous tsunami. The wave would have to travel over 1,500 miles to reach New York. This journey would take several hours, giving us time to warn people. But the energy of the wave would still be immense when it arrives, a long-distance threat that cannot be ignored. The second, more dramatic threat is the one we mentioned earlier, a potential flank collapse of the Cumbre Vieja volcano in the Canary Islands. This is the scenario that keeps geologists and disaster planners awake at night. If a large section of the volcano were to slide into the ocean, it could trigger a megatsunami. The initial wave could be hundreds of meters high, though it would lose much of that height as it traveled across the Atlantic. By the time it reached the East Coast, it might be tens of meters high, still more than enough to cause unprecedented devastation to low-lying coastal cities like New York. The very geography of New York City makes it exquisitely vulnerable. Manhattan is an island surrounded by water. Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island have extensive coastlines. The city is a funnel. The New York Bight, the indentation in the coastline between Long Island and New Jersey, could amplify a tsunami's height as it approaches. The wave would be channeled into the narrow confines of the lower bay, surging up the Hudson and East Rivers. The city's low-lying areas, Lower Manhattan, Red Hook and Brooklyn, the Rockaways and Queens, would be the first to be inundated. The concrete canyons would not stop the water. They would become canals for its destructive power. The story of the disaster begins not with a wave, but with a signal. Deep on the ocean floor, thousands of miles away, a network of sophisticated sensors registers the event. These are the Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis, or DART buoys. Each station consists of a bottom pressure recorder anchored to the seafloor and a companion buoy on the surface. When the seafloor near the Puerto Rico Trench suddenly lurches upwards, the pressure recorder detects the change in the weight of the water column above it. It senses the passage of the nascent tsunami wave, a subtle but unmistakable signature. This data is instantly converted into an acoustic signal and sent up to the surface buoy. The buoy, in turn, transmits the information via satellite to tsunami warning centers, like the one in Palmer, Alaska. Inside these centers, scientists work around the clock, monitoring a constant stream of seismic and sea level data from around the globe. When the alert from the DART buoy arrives, alarms sound. Computer models spring into action, taking the data from the earthquake, its location, depth, and magnitude, and forecasting the tsunami's path and potential size. The models paint a grim picture. A significant wave is heading northwest, directly toward the east coast of the United States. The process is a race against time. Scientists must quickly verify the threat. Is it a real tsunami or a sensor malfunction? They cross-reference the data with information from other seismic stations and tidal gauges. Every minute of delay could cost lives. Once confirmed, a tsunami warning is issued. This is the highest level of alert, meaning a dangerous, inundating wave is imminent. The warning is disseminated through a cascade of official channels, to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and then to state and local emergency management offices. The message is clear and urgent. But how does this warning reach the millions of people in the path of the wave? It travels through the emergency alert system, interrupting television and radio broadcasts. It flashes across smartphone screens as a wireless emergency alert, a jarring, high-pitched tone followed by a simple, terrifying text message. In an ideal world, sirens would wail across the 5 boroughs. But New York City, unlike many Pacific coastal towns, does not have a dedicated tsunami siren system. The city relies on modern technology to spread the word. The challenge is immense, to communicate the gravity of an unprecedented threat to a population that has never imagined it possible. The warning has been issued. There are approximately 4 hours until the wave makes landfall. At first, there is confusion. A tsunami? In New York? It seems impossible. On the streets of Manhattan, the initial alerts are met with a mix of disbelief and, honestly, morbid curiosity. People pull out their phones, sharing screenshots of the warning, commenting on social media. The sky is still clear, the air is warm, the city's relentless rhythm barely seems to skip a beat. Taxis honk, tourists snap photos in Times Square, and traders on Wall Street continue their frantic dance. The threat feels abstract, distant, something happening on a screen. But then, the official response begins to take shape. And well, the reality of the situation sinks in. Mayoral press conferences are broadcast on every channel. The message is simple and stark. Evacuate all low-lying areas immediately. This is not a drill. Maps appear on screens showing the projected inundation zones in red. Zone 1, the most vulnerable area, includes Battery Park City, the financial district, large parts of Brooklyn's waterfront, and the entire Rockaway Peninsula. The order is given to shut down the subway system, to close all bridges and tunnels leading into and out of Manhattan. The city's primary escape routes are being severed to prevent gridlock and chaos. Panic begins to set in. The slow, creeping dread gives way to a frantic scramble for safety. The evacuation becomes a vertical one. For those in the towering skyscrapers of Lower Manhattan, going down to the street is no longer an option. The new directive is to move to higher floors, as high as possible. In residential areas in Brooklyn and Queens, a mass exodus begins. People grab what they can, passports, pets, a few sentimental items, and flee on foot, heading for higher ground. The streets, once orderly, become choked with a river of humanity, a desperate, disorganized march away from the water. In the final hour, a strange calm descends upon the waterfront. The evacuation zones are eerily empty, a ghost town of abandoned cars and silent buildings. The water in the harbor begins to behave strangely. In a phenomenon known as a drawback, the sea level recedes dramatically. The water is pulled back from the shore, exposing the muddy, littered seabed around the Statue of Liberty and the piers along the Hudson. It is the ocean taking a deep breath before its final devastating exhalation. For those few who remain, watching from high-rise windows, it is the last ominous sign that the unthinkable is about to happen. The wave arrives not as a clean, curling surfer's dream, but as a turbulent, debris-filled wall of water. It's a churning bore, a frothing mass of brown and gray that has scraped the ocean floor on its approach. It strikes the outer boroughs first. The Rockaways, a thin peninsula acting as the city's first line of defense, are completely submerged in minutes. The boardwalk splinters into millions of pieces, and entire houses are lifted from their foundations, becoming part of the destructive wave itself. The water pours into Jamaica Bay, a relentless tide that simply does not stop rising. The main force of the wave then funnels into the lower New York Bay, its height amplified by the narrowing geography. It slams into Coney Island, sweeping away the cyclone and the Wonder Wheel as if they were children's toys. The wave splits, one part surging up the East River, the other up the Hudson. The southern tip of Manhattan is the point of impact. The water crashes over the seawalls at Battery Park, a torrent of unimaginable force. The glass facades of the skyscrapers in the financial district, designed to withstand wind, shatter under the immense hydraulic pressure. The sound is a deafening roar, a combination of crashing water and grinding steel. The streets of Lower Manhattan transform into violent, raging canals. The water, now thick with cars, street signs, and the contents of ground floor businesses, rushes through the concrete canyons. It pours into the subway system through stairwells and ventilation grates, creating a subterranean flood of catastrophic proportions. The tunnels that connect the boroughs, the arteries of the city, are filled in an instant. The power grid fails, plunging much of the city into darkness. The iconic skyline remains, but its base is being devoured by a force of nature it was never designed to resist. The flood continues its relentless march northward, though its energy begins to dissipate as it spreads out. The water reaches as far as Canal Street, maybe even 14th Street, depending on the tsunami's true size. In Brooklyn, neighborhoods like Red Hook and Dumbo are completely inundated. The water flows over the piers, into the old warehouses converted into lofts, and through the picturesque cobblestone streets. It is a scene of complete and utter devastation. The city that never sleeps has been forced into a nightmare, its foundations shaken, its spirit submerged beneath a cold, dark, and unforgiving tide. In the face of such overwhelming power, what can science offer? The first and most crucial tool is prediction. The same computer models that forecast the wave's arrival can also create detailed inundation maps. These maps are the foundation of any effective evacuation plan. By simulating how the water will flow, scientists can identify which areas are most at risk, down to the city block. They can tell emergency managers that Zone 1 will see 10 meters of flooding, while Zone 2 might see 3. This information is vital. It allows for a targeted evacuation, moving people from the most dangerous areas first, saving precious time and resources. But what if you cannot evacuate? What if you are trapped in a high-rise building in the inundation zone? Here, the science of structural engineering and fluid dynamics offers a sliver of hope. Most modern skyscrapers in New York are built on deep foundations, anchored to the bedrock of Manhattan schist. They are designed to be flexible, to sway in high winds. While not explicitly designed for a tsunami's lateral force, their robust construction might allow them to withstand the initial impact. The advice from experts is clear: go vertical. Get to the 3rd floor or higher and stay away from windows, which will likely shatter from the pressure and flying debris. Survival also depends on understanding the nature of the threat itself. A tsunami is not a single wave, but a series of them, often called a wave train. The first wave may not be the largest. Subsequent waves can arrive minutes or even hours later, sometimes with even greater force. This is a critical piece of scientific knowledge for anyone who survives the initial inundation. Returning to lower ground after the first wave has receded is a fatal mistake. The water will come back. Safety means staying at a high elevation until authorities have officially declared that the threat has completely passed, a process that could take many hours. Ultimately, the science of survival is a partnership between technology and human behavior. Warning systems like the DART buoys provide the time we need. Inundation maps tell us where to go. But these tools are useless if people do not understand the warnings or fail to act on them. Public education is the final, essential piece of the puzzle. Drills, awareness campaigns, and clear, simple instructions are what translate scientific knowledge into saved lives. Survival is not just about outrunning the water. It is about understanding the threat and making the right decisions in the precious hours and minutes before it strikes. As the water finally recedes, it leaves behind a city transformed. The familiar landscape of Lower Manhattan is now coated in a thick, toxic sludge. The floodwaters were not just seawater. They were a soup of sewage, fuel, chemicals from submerged vehicles, and everything else that was swept away. The stench is overpowering. The streets are impassable, clogged with a tangled mess of cars, trees, and debris from shattered buildings. The silence is profound, broken only by the drip of water, the groan of stressed metal, and the distant wail of sirens from the parts of the city that were spared. The human toll is staggering. First responders, now navigating the flooded streets in boats, begin the grim task of search and rescue. They check submerged vehicles and the lower floors of buildings looking for survivors. But for many, the warning came too late, or they were unable to reach higher ground. The city's hospitals, those that were not flooded themselves, are overwhelmed. The infrastructure is crippled. Power, water, and communication lines are severed. The subway system, the lifeblood of the city, is a water-filled tomb that will take years, if not decades, to restore. The economic heart of the world has suffered a massive coronary. The challenges of the aftermath are as monumental as the wave itself. How do you begin to clean a city on this scale? Where do you house the hundreds of thousands of displaced people? How do you restore basic services to a population in shock? The recovery will be a generational effort, a slow and painful process of pumping out the water, clearing the debris, and rebuilding from the ground up. The psychological scars will run even deeper. The city's identity, its sense of invincibility, has been shattered. The trauma of the event will linger in the collective memory for a century. Experts look at the devastation and see a harsh lesson. They see the failure of imagination, the inability to prepare for a threat that seemed too improbable. They point to the need for better coastal defenses, for tsunami-resilient building codes, and for robust, well-practiced evacuation plans. The aftermath of a New York tsunami would force a global conversation about the vulnerability of our coastal megacities in an era of environmental uncertainty. The city would eventually rebuild, as it always has, but it would be a different city, humbled, scarred, and forever looking over its shoulder at the ocean. We have seen the scenario. We have understood the science. We have witnessed the potential for devastation. This brings us to the final, most important question. How prepared are we really? We have the technology to detect a tsunami on the other side of the ocean. We have the ability to send a warning to millions of phones in an instant. Scientists and emergency managers have drawn the maps and formulated the plans. On paper, a system exists. We have pieces of the puzzle, a framework for response that is both sophisticated and impressive. But a plan on paper is not the same as a practiced, ingrained response. How many New Yorkers know what a tsunami warning means? How many know if they live or work in an evacuation zone? How many have a family plan that includes a meeting point on high ground? In a city of over 8 million people, with a constant influx of tourists and commuters, achieving a state of true preparedness is a monumental task. The sense of security, born from the simple fact that this has never happened before, is our greatest weakness. Complacency is a far more insidious threat than any wave. Experts offer a sobering assessment. While our warning systems are top tier, our public awareness and infrastructure are lagging. Dr. Stephen Ward, a geophysicist who has modeled the Canary Islands scenario, has stated that the East Coast is almost completely unprepared for a major tsunami. There are no tsunami shelters, no regularly practiced citywide drills, and a general lack of the tsunami culture that exists in places like Japan. We have invested in the science of prediction, but have underinvested in the sociology of survival. We know how to see the wave coming, but we have not fully prepared our people to get out of its way. And so we are left with this chilling thought. Our world is defined by events that were once considered impossible, right up until the moment they happened. We build our cities on the assumption of stability, on the belief that the ground beneath our feet is solid, and the sea will keep its distance. But the planet makes no such promises. The forces that shape our world operate on timelines far longer than human history, and they are not bound by our expectations. We have the knowledge, we have the tools, but do we have the will to prepare for the unthinkable? Are we truly ready?